When speaking of that, again, call to action, because this is the sort of thing. Well, first of all, to highlight, like, genre fans are kind of the ones that have kept a lot of things alive in history, because they come out and actually financially support a lot of these projects. I mean, I think it's kind of like an open Hollywood secret that a lot of films only exist because genre fans, they come out for the horror movies, and those subsidize a lot of the more expensive projects. And it seems like nowadays with physical media, horror soundtracks are doing really well. Like, you got Waxwork Records out there putting out brand new ones every single Friday. You've got what is the other big one? TerrorVision does a lot of them.
Yeah, Mondo and Death Waltz, and
of course,
that that had just started when I started the book. You know, they had, I think Mondo had put out a couple. I don't think Waxwork had put any out yet when I started the book, but by the time the book was done, like, everything was like crescendoing. Like, the book came out, the first book came out like at the perfect moment, because, like I said, Carpenter was just about to go on tour, and all these like boutique record labels had kind of popped up, and were putting out records while I was doing the book. So that by the time the book that came out, like, horror film music was kind of at its peak in popularity.
And now, like, Waxwork has exploded. I mean, they're selling out of stuff sometimes in literally a couple days, and for big things. And not to mention, they're putting out stuff that's never been released on vinyl, which is a huge plus nowadays. All of those types of vinyls, are you still into anything like that, or get excited about any of those releases?
Yeah, well, look, when I was doing the books and then post the books and in between the books, I've always been a bit of a I guess a media addict, like,
Yep.
When it was VHS tapes, I had 1,000 of them. When it was Blu-rays, it was DVDs, I had thousands of them. And then Blu-ray came around and just kept on building. And vinyl was no different. I had vinyls. I always had a turntable, but then when the horror movie soundtracks started coming out, I got into it big time. And I've had the honor of writing liner notes for some of them, like Halloween's 4 and 5 and Freddy versus Jason. And
nice.
I'm now kind of trying to unload everything, because I live in a tiny apartment in Manhattan, and I would love to at some point.
Wait, is Manhattan expensive or something for space? I've never heard that ever.
And records take up a lot of room. And when the first book came out, I kind of did like the horror movie convention circuit.
Oh, nice.
And I would get a table to try to sell the book, and I started buying lots of records to sell. I was like, I'll draw them into the table with records, and then I'll sell them the book. And so I still have boxes of like inventory from that too.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I have hundreds and hundreds of horror movie soundtracks on records. I have some of them. I have 4 copies of them.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know, 2,000 Blu-rays or something. And I still collect CDs, because I started doing podcasts, and right now I'm doing a podcast called Score to Death Radio, where I play music. And before that, I was doing a show called Cuts from the Crypt, which somebody invited me to come and do. And so I started buying CDs again, because they were so much easier to kind of like rip onto the computer to put into a podcast. So I also have hundreds and hundreds of film soundtracks on CD and horror movie soundtracks on CD. So, unfortunately, you get so many books. I have tons of books. You get to a point when you have so little space that you can't get to everything. Like everything's like 5 deep or stacked, and so now I'm in the process of trying to get rid of everything. I want to eventually move to the West Coast, and I don't want to drag too much stuff. I'll start over when I get there.
Right. I get
but
that.
part of but yeah, look, the internet changed the way we consume everything,
of course,
including physical media, like like Shout Factory and Arrow and Mondo and all the records and stuff like that couldn't exist without the internet and social media and kind of the way those things work. So it's been a tremendous boom. In the late 90s, there were companies like Anchor Bay that were doing the Lord's
Huge.
work by doing, releasing widescreen VHS tapes of Lucio Fulci movies and Dario Argento movies, Mario Bava, and now it's it's, I think it's a double-edged sword in a way. Like, you used to have to hunt for stuff, and there was a certain excitement about it, but now everything's really easy to get, which is fantastic. But then part of the reason why, like, I'm also just like kind of stopping the physical media thing is because, like, how many copies of Halloween do I really need? It's an addiction, really. So, and at some point I just had to go cold turkey. Like, I had 4 VHS tapes of Halloween, and then I had, every time Halloween would come out on DVD, and Evil Dead would come out on these evergreen titles that had like 1 million titles, and now 4K is starting. I got overwhelmed, and not to mention I'm trying to make a movie, so I'm downsizing. I'm trying to make some. We've already spent, before the crowdfunding started. I mean, I've already spent like over $10,000 on the movie, so wow. Kind of out of pocket to fly to LA to interview these guys, to get equipment and all that stuff. So part of like my slowing down and kind of getting rid of everything is also just like, I could use the money right now to pursue my creative exploits. And because there'll be 4Ks everything in no time, and I can start fresh when everything's on 4K.
Yeah, that's a good point. As a little aside, I'll just throw this up here again to everybody. I've already backed this. This is something that I'm very eager to see the final product. Not to mention, I also backed to get the books. I'm so eager to be able to read those front to back and just dive right in. I sincerely hope that we can get this up to like 300 people pledged by the end of this, because this would, at the very least, because this is something that can really light up a generation of not only film fans, but of music fans, but of people that want to create music in the future. And we need people that are continuing to do that. And again, just not to make it sound like I'm kissing up or anything, I thank you, because this sort of thing, it needs archival. That's a big part of it. And we're entering that era where a lot of these creators, sadly, are kind of dying away, and it's going to be something that will continue for the rest of the time. Now that we're into the filmmakers age, and you're literally encapsulating their words on page, so it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a part of it. It was, the first book is very weighted in composers whose career started in the 70s and worked throughout the 80s, with a smattering of more quote unquote contemporary composers.
Right.
So the second book, I kind of went the other direction with it. It's a lot of younger composers comparatively, whose career started in the 90s and the 2000s. And I interviewed some Italian composers in the first book. So I interviewed some Japanese composers in the second book. And yeah, I mean, it's important. I mean, not to make the books seem more important than they are to most people, but to me, like, there is like a responsibility to kind of like document
there absolutely
the work, these people, and what they've done. Bob Cobert was just kind of the most extreme example of it, because he was so old, and I knew that, look, at 94, like, how much more time does the guy have? So right. Even if he lived to be 100, I mean, that's still, still like not a whole lot of time. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I do. It's kind of a responsibility that I don't take lightly, and when I do the interviews, especially for the books, the movie is obviously a very different thing. It was like, I strive to do the definitive interview with them. And that's why I kind of ask for a lot of time. And most of them are extremely generous with their time. And I mean, they all are, obviously. Some of them are just don't have a lot of it.
Right.
Like Bear McCreary's busy scoring like 15 movies a year and television shows. I don't know when the guy sleeps, let alone take an hour out of his schedule to talk to me. So, yeah, I mean, it's important. And I'm not just talking about horror composers, like, I think one of the driving forces behind all of this, obviously I love film music and I love horror movies, and that was kind of like the main influence, but I just love talking to creative people. And before I started doing the books, I didn't really think of myself as like some expert on horror film music or some, like elite fan. Like I love them more than anybody else. Like
Right.
now that I've been in the community and I've been to horror conventions and I've talked to people and I've been interviewed on podcasts, like I realized that like I'm really small potatoes when it comes to like the passion for this in some ways. Like some people are really, really into it. I just love talking to creative people about what they do. And
Same.
I managed to like carve out this little niche for myself where at the time nobody was talking to these people. And there was enough information that I wanted to know that I was able to just kind of start and make something of it. And my appreciation for it and everything I know about the craft has been through this experience of doing the books. You know what I mean? Like people, refer to me as like some kind of expert now because I have the books, and I'm really not. Like everything I know about this, you can know too by reading these books, like everything I learned from them. So, and it was through talking to them that I gained like so much more respect for the craft and
Right.
what they do and how they do it. And so I keep going until I don't, I've often thought about switching topics, like I would love to do an acting book, like horror movie actors. And there was a time when I thought about doing it, and there was a time when I thought about doing special effects, but then luckily I didn't because people have done special effects books.
Yeah.
But I keep doing the music stuff because I still find it interesting, and I keep still finding more things to fall in love with about it. And every time I interview somebody new, it's like a whole new roller coaster for me, and learn and their point of views about it. It's just everything's unique. Whether even when they're talking about the same thing, and they're even talking about how they do things the same way, it's still unique because everybody's got a different perspective on it. And
Right.
so, I love movies, and I went to film school and I always wanted to make a movie. And when I did the first book, I wanted to make the movie then, but I was kind of glad I didn't, because doing the second book and doing the podcasts and, it's just like I learned so much more, and I developed relationships with so many more composers. And so I think like the movie I can make now is a much better movie than I would have been able to make in 2016 after the first book. Like, I feel like I'm ready to do it now. And that's why I wanted to do it. I've been trying to put it together through COVID, and was starting to try to figure everything out before COVID, and then COVID hit and everything got delayed. And then I was trying to sell it as a TV show because my day job is in television, and just things weren't working out. And people were interested, but it was like there was talk of like they just wanted to buy the idea from me and they didn't want me involved. And I was like, well, this is like, like I can't sell the title, like I'm @Scored to Death on social media.
Right.
Like at this point, like I am kind of scored to death. I can't just sell like a title to you.
Damn.
So I kind of said, all right, like if I want to do it and I want to be a part of it, and I want it done the way I want it done, not necessarily the right way, but if I want to make the movie that I want to see, which is what the books were, they were the books that I wanted to read, I'm going to have to do it myself. And the campaign runs to November 1st. If we're getting close, I've talked to Kickstarter. There's a chance they may let me extend it for a little bit, but that's not a definite. It's been educational and kind of a real eye opener, this experience. I'm not going to lie. I've been a little shocked at the lack of support it's gotten from horror movie websites and stuff, but maybe doing it in October was not a good idea because there's just like
there's a lot.
There's a glut of, horror material to report on. And, that's on me. That's my, I'll take responsibility for that one.
Well, I guarantee you we'll get it. We'll get at least 5 more supporters just for doing this video.
Every little bit counts. And that's what I've been saying. It's like, the beautiful thing about crowdfunding is I think some people will look at it and say, well, like I can't give $25 for this. I can't get a Blu-ray for $50. And, if everybody can give a little bit, then it can make a huge difference. And even if you can't give, just spreading the word is, letting people know the campaign exists. I mean, the frustration for me has not been the money, because I understand, not everybody has the means to do it. The frustration for me so far has been like the people who I really expected would help promote it, not promoting it. Because that doesn't cost anything. And, so I thank you for giving me a platform here to talk about it and let people know about it. Because that's like the real important thing is like getting the word out. And now there's like 2 weeks left. I'm optimistic, and if we can't raise the money, it's Kickstarter. I don't get any of the money if we don't reach the goal, but I'll figure it out. If I can't do it through crowdfunding, I'll figure out some other way to do it, because it's like you said, for me, it's a love letter to this, and it's a passion for me, and it really is a project that I'm doing out of love. And we'll get a movie made, whether it's the best, whether it's a movie that can live up to the potential, that's going to depend on how much money we can raise, because there's all the rights to use the stuff, and lawyers to do fair use, where I don't have to pay for the clips. You need to pay a lawyer to make sure that all works. It gets really complicated and expensive. And so it's not like I could just like take the $10,000. Like I could make a movie now with the 5 interviews I've done. But it won't be the movie that I feel like this topic deserves to have. And so that's really it. I mean, I want to make a movie that's worthy of the topic and the composers and the fans, so that's where we're at. And hopefully a movie will get made. Just what movie will get made, we'll see.
Well, either way, I can't wait to watch it. I do want to throw out there that even though there's a lot of downplaying your commitments and contributions to this, every single museum out there has to have somebody that starts it. And I, again, just thank you for making this museum, because without it, a lot of those voices would be lost. And it's something that is important. And archival is something that really doesn't get talked about enough in society, because people just look at a lot of this as a given, I think, still. And accessibility is great, but I think streaming and all that has given people the idea that this is just here forever, and a lot of it is not, unless we do something properly to actually archive it. Spotify servers can be wiped tomorrow. We have no clue about any of that. So
that's a good point. Yeah. This is I appreciate that. This is the pleasure has been all mine to this act of archiving all this stuff. I mean, it really has been such a wonderful experience. I wouldn't still be doing it now after 2 books and podcasts if it wasn't fulfilling. And if it wasn't for the feedback that I get, that I know I've had composers who have contacted me and have thanked me for doing it because they've learned from it, and which is amazing, and it's those are kinds of things that you'd never think about or about.
Right.
Like a book isn't necessarily on, it's not on the internet, and it's not, podcast is also still, I mean, as you're doing this, like you don't know everybody that's listening to it, but like people that are watching this right now and watching all the other shows, it's making an impact, and it's influencing people's in a way that, like, you'll never know the extent of it. And having now had the books out for a few years, to hear feedback, it's really been kind of overwhelming in terms of the way the books have inspired people and impacted people, the things that I never would have expected, which is a good thing to, bring up in terms of the campaign for people that are physical media collectors. With the campaign, this is a perfect example. Not knowing how much money would be raised, I couldn't promise a soundtrack because I don't know if there's going to be enough money to hire a composer to do it, whether I'm going to have to do it with library cues, and then I can't release those. So what I did do for the campaign is I reached out to a bunch of composers and artists, and I said, hey, I'm trying to make a movie. Will you lend your time and your talent to the project by recording a new cover of a horror movie theme and then giving it to me for free to put it on a CD and a vinyl record so that I can try to raise money to make the movie. And so far we have, I think 8 or 9 have said yes. Alan Howarth, the band Voyager, the band Anima Morte, Steve Moore from the band Zombie, Holly Amber Church, who's in the book, the Blair brothers, who are great composers, Richard Christie from the Howard Stern Show, which we were just talking about earlier. He's a phenomenal heavy metal drummer, and he's a friend of mine, and he's a huge fanatic of horror film music, and so he's doing a cover of a John Carpenter tune. So all these artists have been, here's a perfect example of like, I reached out to a bunch of people I was a fan of, and I said, hey, I'm trying to do this. And they believed enough in the project to say like, yeah, so we're having, newly recorded versions of themes by John Carpenter and Fabio Frizzi and, stuff from The Shining and stuff from Bram Stoker's Dracula. These people are recording new versions of these things exclusively for a limited edition release on vinyl and CD, just in an effort to try to raise money. So for everybody that collects stuff out there, that's to me, that's like as exciting as the movie to put all this together. Cause like, not only am I now, it's really 2 campaigns in one, really. Cause it's like, I'm also producing a record.
Right. And you can get both for $100 right here. I mean, that's a damn bargain, to be quite honest. When you're doing this from the ground up, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be, I've heard some of the stuff so far, and it's really cool. It's, it's really interesting to see everybody kind of pull their own, put their own spin on some of the things. And Wojciech Golczewski is another, he's a great composer who I love, who's done some great horror movies, and he's also contributing something. So it's been I mean, I almost completely forgot about that because now I'm so I'm so like in the movie mode, but it was like, oh yeah, like I forgot, like I'm also producing a record, which is like kind of as cool, if not cooler than the movie itself. So that's going to be kind of exclusively available through the Kickstarter. And then maybe at some point, if we still have copies left over, we'll make those available in another way. But we're only going to press. I think we're going to try to keep it to like 500 tops for the record. But obviously, if we don't sell 500 of them through the Kickstarter, like we'll make less of them. It's really, we're going to keep it as, we're trying to raise money, not make profits. I'm not really bogged down with a bunch of inventory that I can't move for the movie. So it's really going to be really limited, very cool collection of stuff. And but that's another example of just like what I was saying about like the support and the people that have reached out. The stuff is the internet and all these things. It's fascinating to when you start to. I do a podcast called Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers as well, and the feedback we get from that, it's just, you don't realize how big the reach is. It's like the pebble in the pond, like the ripples of that reach out like really far. And that's been the fascinating thing about the books, is the not just the composers I've met and become friendly with, but the fellow horror music fans and film music fans that I've met and become friendly with, and people that I genuinely consider really close friends, or people that I met like at my book signing for the first book, because we share this passion together. And it's been just an amazing experience. And I'm hoping the movie will just kind of move that experience on to the next level and keep it going for us.
And that's the thing. Things like this, they build genuine communities. And that's also important moving forward too. I mean, we all just came out of this almost, it's still going technically, but a pandemic that we all pretend doesn't exist anymore. And so many of us were isolated to a point where we kind of had to find these little niche communities. And something like Scored to Death can, not to make it macabre in here or anything like that, but save a lot of people from that depression of isolation or going through a tough time, and just finding out that other people enjoy the same things you do can really keep you going sometimes. So it's nice to see this and participate and share the campaigns, and just make people understand that, hey, I'm a fan of this thing. And without that, these things can't be made. Sometimes these things can't grow. These things can't ever even see the light of day. So to show that passion and support, you really got to do even the freest thing just by clicking that little share button.
Yeah, just help spread the word. Support if you can financially, but if you can't, just letting people know it exists and getting the word out is just as important. Because for instance, you were saying like you didn't even know any of this stuff existed until somebody
before,
brought
like,
it
a
up.
month ago.
Yeah, like the books. The books have been around a long time, so it's about just passing the word and passing information. So if you know anybody that is into horror movies and film music, like if they haven't heard of it, this might be right up their alley, whether it's the movie or the books or the podcast or any of this stuff,
or a new soundtrack. I mean, look at that. This is freaking great.
Yeah, that's kind of really exciting. I was really shocked when people started saying yes to that. But that's kind of been my motto about everything, including the books. The books only existed because I said to myself, like, I'll just start reaching out to people and asking.
Right.
And see what happens. And though my whole, 30 plus composers have said, sure, at this point. I got a publishing deal because I started emailing publishers and I said, I'm writing this book. Do you want to publish it? And somebody said, yeah, it sounds interesting. Sure. I wanted to do a record, not just, because I thought it'd be cool to make a record, but also to try to raise money for the movie. And I started reaching out to professional musicians and composers and saying, like, will you do what you do professionally for somebody else? Will you do that for me for free? And everybody's been like, great. I mean, obviously some people have said no. People like, we're touring, we don't have time, that kind of stuff. But the fact that as many people have said yes has just been amazing. And that just goes to show you, like, it never hurts to ask. What's the worst that can happen? Somebody says no. And it just goes to show you, like, how generous people can be. These people who are scoring a movie, taking time out to, come up with a new arrangement of a horror movie, an existing horror movie thing, so that I can put it on a record.
Right.
But they're fellow film music fans and horror movie fans, and they're excited to be a part of it, and they want to see the movie get made, and they said yes, which is amazing to me. But so it's just, the whole thing's been kind of fantastic. So I'm excited to make the movie. Just the little bit of the movie that I've shot so far, and these videos I've been putting together for the Kickstarter campaign and for social media. It's been really exciting just to, like, go through the footage and see what we have now, and putting even keeping everything down to like 2 minutes so that I can put it on social media. But knowing that there's so much more than those 2 minutes that are fascinating, and to be now, so it's exciting to see, like, wow, like, there's so much cool stuff. And the idea of Blu-ray and physical media is amazing, because, like, the Kickstarter has a option for a bonus disc, because there's all this material that obviously can't fit into like a 2-hour movie. I personally don't want it to be like a 5-hour documentary. That's just like, those are fine. People love them.
Doesn't do well in the festival circuit either.
Like, there's a place for those movies. So that's not what I want this movie to be. But through, like, the beauty of, physical media, like, we can give you hours of material that didn't make it into the movie. Interviews, sections of, extended interviews. We can put in whole sections of stuff that doesn't make it to the movie as kind of bonus content. And that's kind of amazing. That's because when you interview so many people, you're going to edit it into a movie. I mean, I'm a professional editor. I edit television stuff. So, I said to the composers as I'm interviewing, like, yeah, like I'm talking to you for 2 hours. And like, obviously the movie's only going to be 2 hours. But I said, like, so much of this the beauty of it is so much of it can live as bonus content. So it's not just like wasted, that's on the cutting room floor and nobody's ever going to see it. So, I mean, that's the exciting part about it is
that's awesome.
There's the movie, but then there's all this other material that people can enjoy from the movie.
Fascinating. Anything else after we have gone fully in depth on this? Anything else that you want to throw out for people to know, other than maybe shouting out everything that you host and write and share and perform and everything for yourself anymore?
Just like I said, the movie is going to be, movie's titled Score to Death: The Dark Art of Scary Movie Music. It's on Kickstarter through November 1st. You can follow me on social media at Scored to Death on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And some of the videos have been now put onto the Kickstarter campaign that you can see them, but some of them are just kind of right now living on social media. You can buy copies of the books from me directly at Scored to Death or from other book retailers like Amazon. You can also join a mailing list on at the website Scored to Death, so that scoredtodeath.com, so that you can stay up to date with everything in that way. And right now for the Halloween season, for Scored to Death Radio, which is the podcast, I did a massive, it's the longest episode I've done so far. I call it supersized. It's a supersized exploration into the music of the post-Scream 1990s slasher boom. And I was joined by Rachel Reeves, who's a fantastic film and film music journalist, one of my favorites. And she joined me, and we're playing hours of music and talking about them in between the blocks. We talked playing stuff from Scream and Scream 2, and I know what you did last summer. Most exciting, I think, is Christopher Young, who people will know for doing the scores for Hellraiser 2 and Drag Me to Hell and Spider-Man 3 and all kinds of. Chris is a good friend of mine who I interviewed for the first book. He wrote the afterword for my second book, and he will be featured in the documentary. He gave me permission to use a suite of music from Urban Legend that he put together. He's been doing a project that he talks about in the first book, where he's taking all his scores and making like suites out of them, so that they live in their own way, away from the movie, as pieces of music. And he gave me permission to play the Urban Legend one. So we have like kind of a premiere of this suite that he edited together. He's been working on and put together from his music for Urban Legend. And we're playing that on Score to Death Radio right now in the 1990s slash-a-thon. So, but yeah, mostly, really cool. Yeah, we played, I just did a 5-part episode on the music of Goblin. And a lot of the episodes are just me kind of like being a DJ and playing music, and the Goblin stuff is a little more of a documentary kind of feel and audio. There's a lot of information.
Oh, nice.
So I'm kind of like, I'm just kind of stretching my legs. I'm spreading my wings on testing the waters with this podcast,
right,
and changing the format up and doing different things right now to try to keep it exciting for me and hopefully the listeners. But we have 2 episodes dedicated entirely to music from Stephen King movies, and so that's Score to Death Radio, and you can find that from the Cinematic Sound Radio network. So if you're going to look it up on like iTunes or Spotify, if you can't find it from Score to Death Radio, Cinematic Sound Radio. And then there's older episodes of Score to Death, the podcast, where there's interviews that aren't in the books. I like Bill Conti, for instance, who did the Rocky score, and Ted Nugent, of all people. So because
All
Bill
right.
Conti did a score for a horror movie called Nomads, which I absolutely love the movie. It's one of John McTiernan's first movies, and Bill Conti composed it, but he kind of composed it in collaboration with Ted Nugent.
Wow.
And Ted Nugent plays guitar on the soundtrack. So, and that soundtrack's never been released, but I love that score and I love that movie. So when I talked to Bill Conti, which we talk a lot about Rocky and Karate Kid and stuff, but when I talked to him about Nomads, he was like, yeah, Ted Nugent. So then I reached out to Uncle Ted and I said, you want to talk about Nomads? And he's like, yeah. So I did an episode, and I talked also on the podcast. I talked to Jim Lang, who did the In the Mouth of Madness score with John Carpenter. So
wow, bringing it
there's
full circle.
There's a lot of stuff to check out for the people that are still awake after listening to me babble for an hour and a half.
Well, it's all meaningful information. Blake, thank you so much for your time. This is going to go far and wide. I'm even really hoping that certain people that I'm going to talk to after this will share it as well, because this is something that needs some very specific spotlights on it. And just again, thank you for all the time and energy put into spotlighting exactly what you're doing.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you having me on. This was a lot of fun, and maybe someday we can do it where we're not just promoting something, but we can chat about other things too.
We'll dive into something else. Until next time, Blake, thanks, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, man.
See you, sir.